Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Brian Siggers, and I want to welcome you all to the State of the Environment. I'm proud to serve as the Cleveland Metro Advocacy Director for the Ohio Environmental Council, and on behalf of OEC, I want to welcome you all here. The OEC has been fighting for clean air, clean water, and thriving communities across the state for over 50 years. We work in the courts, the State House, and on the ground in the communities like Cleveland, because we believe that where you live should not determine whether you have access to a healthy environment. Cleveland is the center of our work here as well. The city has carried more than its share of environmental burden, and it has the organizing tradition, the talent, and the will to lead. And that's why we're here today. That's why this event exists, and that's why tonight's conversation matters. We're also proud to be co-hosting this evening with a partner who shares that vision and is putting resources behind it. Growth Opportunity Partners has been the cornerstone of a community-centered development, and Go Green Energy Fund is providing that clean energy and economic opportunity belong together. To welcome us and share a few words, please welcome the President and CEO of Growth Opportunity Partners and the Go Green Energy Fund, Michael Jeans.
I feel like I should stand after that introduction. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Michael Jeans, the founding CEO of Growth Opportunity Partners, also known as Growth Ops. Some acknowledgments that I need to make and that I want to make. One, I have some colleagues here with me, Sandra Miller, our Chief Operating Officer. I've got Chris Graves here, our office manager, and my executive assistant and wife, Aurelie Jeans, here to support and tell me when I mess up. A bit of protocol here also. I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Annette Blackwell, Mayor of the City of Maple Heights. If you could give the mayor a round of applause. They say I can't say much, but she's doing really amazing things. If you're not aware, please Google her. All right. Growth Ops is a community financial institution. We were established to bring resources and data and information that often is accessible for the few and not the many. And so we provide capital and advisory services primarily to organizations, municipalities, and people who are benefiting and contributing to low and moderate income communities. We want to increase the quality of life for those households and frankly get people from surviving to a thriving environment. We created Go Green Energy Fund in 2020. That's the first African-American-led green bank in the United States, thanks to the support from Congresswoman Shontel Brown. Thank you. And thank you. And so that allows us to expand into 8 states to do the meaningful work that we believe all citizens deserve. You're sitting in the Charles Bowie Center, the Education Center for East Mount Zion Baptist Church. When I first walked through this space, I was a little embarrassed because I didn't know it was here. And I have walked past here 1,000 times. I rode my bike past here as a kid. And I drive through here, and I didn't know this center was here until Reverend Brian Cash walked me through this space. And so hopefully while you're here, you enjoy the space enough that maybe you'll host one of your own events here as well. The history of East Mount Zion, I had my notes pulled up, but it timed out, goes back, and I believe it dates to 1908. This is a historic African-American church and part of a migration of people who came here and purchased this land, and I should maybe give a bit of context before all was said and done. This church sat just a few blocks away from Millionaires Row. And so for an African-American congregation to write a check for $125,000 cash and finance the difference, it was a pretty significant event. It's situated right here on the Cleveland Clinic campus, and you can imagine that maybe the clinic may want to do something else with this space. The church has done a wonderful job partnering, but one of the things I think we all know is the importance of maintaining spaces and maintaining history and ensuring that those histories and spaces are not washed away. And so as we enjoy this space, I do this in a bit of the spirit of as we have events and our native colleagues share with us the importance of the land that we're on. This land is just as sacred for the African Americans who settled here, moved their families here from the South. And a fun fact, Jesse Owens was married here in this facility by one of the early pastors of the church. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for giving me the moment, and I look forward to chatting later.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael. And before we get started here, I do want to say that we've gotten a message that if you drive a gray Honda Fit, you have left your engine running, so you might want to look into that. It's a gray Honda Fit. All right. So before we get into tonight's conversation, I want to take a minute to recognize some people in this room as well, people who have made this possible and people who really support the Cleveland work that we're doing. So I want to shout out our awesome team at the Cleveland Environmental Advocacy Coalition. It's a coalition of organizations across the city that do work every day on clean air, clean water, affordable energy, and healthy neighborhoods. So if you're a member of the Cleveland Environmental Advocacy Coalition, can you please stand and be recognized? Thank you all for the great work you do. And I would also be remiss if I didn't shout out my colleagues from the OEC in the back there that were helping with the sign-in. So thank you guys for being here, Elena and Carolyn. So tonight, on the same note of the Cleveland Environmental Advocacy Coalition, this is exciting for us because we've recently released our new policy platform, community-driven agenda grounded in environmental justice and issues that hit closest to home: energy burden, public health, safe drinking water, and access to clean and safe green spaces. So we have copies available here tonight. They should be on your table. If you guys have run out, then we have some by the Parks and Green Space Coalition table as well. So now, to dig into where Cleveland stands on these issues, tonight's panel reflects on something you don't always see, where intersectionality is the heart of environmental justice, and everyone is brought here today on one conversation about that. So the reality of energy burden, public health, maternal health, economic opportunity is that these aren't separate issues. These are the same issue experienced by many here in Cleveland. So we have Congresswoman Shontel Brown, who represents the 11th Congressional District, who brings a federal lens to what's happening on the ground here. We have Michael Jeans, who leads the Growth Opportunity Partners in the Go Green Energy Fund, the first African-American-led green bank in the country. And we have Jazmin Long, who is the CEO of Birthing Beautiful Communities, centering Black maternal health and neighborhood well-being. And I will be moderating the conversation tonight. So with that being said, let's get into it. So the first conversation, thank you. I love that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. The first thing I want to talk about today is economic impact and affordability. So I know, Michael Jeans, I want to start with you. I know you gave a little bit about the Growth Opportunity Partners and the Go Green Energy Fund, but can you tell us a little bit more and ground us more in your work and what it's trying to accomplish here in Cleveland?
Absolutely. One early comment, I'd also like to thank one of our directors, Larry Davis here, who is supporting along with Lesha. Appreciate your support and always being there. So Growth Opportunity Partners is a bit of a culmination of my background. I started my career in accounting with KPMG, security with Morgan Stanley, and then a long banking career. And most of my clients were doing well before they met me, and I don't begrudge that. I celebrate that. But one of the things I recognized along the way is that I could double their assets and not change their lives. And along the way, I met some really good people who were doing good things. They were doing good and they were doing well, and I knew that the doing good part was missing from that aspect of my corporate life. So having the conversations to create growth ops were pretty easy. How do we get the same access to data and information to people who are doing so much with so little? And the experiment quickly left the lab and became a reality. When there's scarcity, it's amazing what people can accomplish. When families are on the other end of a hard day's work or a hard night's work, it's amazing what parents and wives and husbands will do. And if you actually value who they are, then it's not really it's not an argument. It's not a debate on whether they deserve it. And so what we've been able to do is not assign value, but believe it when we're told this is who I am, this is what's important to me, and we capitalize those dreams. Now look, we can't capitalize everything. But if you've got a good plan, then that's a great start. If you're working on your plan, then we can help you with that plan. But at the end of the day, we believe regardless of your address, you should have the same access to whatever your goals and your dreams are that you'd like to accomplish. And that's what we do at Growth Ops by advising, providing loans when necessary, grants, and I whisper grants because whenever I say that, we get a lot of emails. And we're looking to do more on the equity investment side so we can make true investments to people of color, to communities of color, and to disadvantaged communities.
Thank you very much for that response, Michael. And I want to take a quick pause just to give you all a charge that you guys have note cards on your table. So if at any point you have a question that you would like to ask to the panel, please feel free to write it down on the note card, and when we get into that portion of the program, someone will collect it, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. So please be mindful of that. So my next question, we're here about environmental justice, and we hear this phrase a lot. So for residents of Cleveland, what does environmental justice actually look like? Like, are we talking lower bills, better health outcomes, better job opportunities? How does this concept affect someone's day-to-day life? And can we start with Congresswoman Shontel Brown, then we'll go to
Sure.
Jazz Long.
So thank you again for pulling this panel together. And I want to thank you both for the amazing work that you do in this space. And I think the things that you listed are all of the above, right? It looks like lower energy bills. It looks like better health outcomes. And that sounds simple, but it's not always easy to accomplish. And so the fact that we have Michael making the investment into communities and that we had an administration the last administration that believed in the economic opportunities and being able to make them a reality in communities. For example, you shouted out Mayor Blackwell being here. Maple Heights, under the last administration, was able to receive money for solar panels for their schools, but the Trump administration clawed that money back. And so it means believing in opportunities and providing the resources and support to make sure communities that have been left out of the conversation or that are often overlooked get access to those things so that we can, again, have lower energy bills, improve our health outcomes, and create job opportunities. Because the number of opportunities that could have been, job opportunities that could have been generated from that solar panels installation project were numerous. But now we have an administration that does not believe that. So you can see direct correlation on how who's in office can impact the economy and then environmental justice.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, Jazz.
So first of all, thank you again for convening us. I think it is very important for us as a community to really think about what the environment means, right, and what it means to talk about environmental justice. As someone who's in the birth space, I'm always called to think about what it means to live in a community that does not necessarily have as many tree canopies as we should have, means for pregnant moms or families walking and trying to get on a bus and go from A to B, and what that actually does for their health, both mentally, physically, and spiritually, and how it plays a role in infant mortality. And so we don't always think about the environment as a factor that leads to infant mortality and maternal morbidity, but it is truly, pardon me, it is truly a factor. And so when we're thinking about how do we look at these things, of course it's lower cost of things, but it's education as well. And to think about what does having solar panels on my house, or how do we get landlords who actually care enough to take care of their properties enough to ensure that our families are well taken care of. And so much of this is kind of, I always say like the word pervasive, because it's like, how do you control all of these things? And we don't boil the ocean, but all of these things are interconnected, and it really impacts how people's livelihoods are. We know that we have high rates of asthma in our community because of some of these environmental factors. I was with the state rep today talking about how, you know, when we're looking at these data centers and what that will do to the environment of our communities, it's not that we just want to say no immediately, right? But we want to understand the full totality of the impact of what this could do to an already impoverished community, to an already community that has challenges. Is it going to actually help us or harm us? Are there going to be real jobs created because of this? And I think that we really have to, in a place like Cleveland, I moved here 13 years ago maybe at this point, and I moved here and worked in talent attraction. And the whole point was, how do we stop the brain drain? But if we don't have a good environment and a place people want to raise a family and want to, or can raise a family and feel sustained, how do we do that? And so all of this is interconnected when we really look at how the environment plays a role in our community. So you know, I'm in this place where I think about these things. I'm building a building, and I look at, you know, how do we build for sustainability? How do we think about what makes our next generation, our legacies, better than the next? So thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. So my next question I want to ask, we talk about utility bills. Clevelanders are trying to just keep up right now between bills, rent, groceries. From you all's perspectives, what's really driving those costs, and where do you see real opportunities to bring them down?
So I'll jump in. Okay. So environmentally, the political environment is also a real thing, and we have an administration who has introduced policies that have had an adverse impact on a lot of people's cost of living, from gas, goods to groceries. Everything is going up. But even this war of choice has created scenarios where diesel fuel is gone up, which is the source of transportation for a lot of the things that we use and consume on a daily basis. And so again, I highlight the city of Maple Heights, but it wasn't just Maple Heights, it was Euclid. There were other school systems that were impacted by the decisions of this administration to pull back resources. So it matters when you have people in office who actually understand how their policies are going to impact communities. And right now, I feel like too many people are making decisions about places and people that they have no real connection with. I am of and from this community. I live in Warrensville Heights. When you talk about tree canopies, and I think we might get into this a little bit later, but we are one of those cities that actually struggle with, you know, overheating, and that's a real thing. And it doesn't just impact your physical being, it impacts your emotional being, and your ability to be able to handle situations change when you are overheated and heightened situations. And so it's a real struggle when we're dealing with prices and compounded with the environmental injustices that we have. So we have to have people in positions that are close enough to the ground to understand when they're making their policy decisions. And so we got a lot of work ahead of us, right? We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we should be encouraged in the fact that we can still get things done contrary to all of the things that are working against us. And that's what gives me a little bit of hope at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Okay, if I might, I think, because we have some young people here, I think it's so important, and the Congresswoman might not be able to say this, but I think that we really have to understand that elections have consequences, and I think sometimes we feel so hopeless, helpless, and we feel that maybe things are not necessarily working in our best favor, that we say, I don't need to vote. I think if there's any takeaway from any conversation that I'm participating in these days, is that we actually have to get out and vote. We have to encourage one another to be able to do this, and we have to understand if they're fighting to take our rights away from us to vote, why? Because our vote really does make a difference, and it can make a difference, and I think that we have to really understand the implications. When we talk about prices going up and things such as that, these are literally tied to political decisions that whether we participated or not, it still impacts us, and it is impacting us. The other day I paid $6 for gas, and I said, oh no, okay?
You must have a nice car.
No, and I get regular gas. I'm getting basic regular gas, and I went to that gas station in Cleveland Heights. That gas is jacked up. It's the one that's right there across from the Starbucks. That gas is high.
Jazmin, but no, it's
that gas is high at that one station, and I didn't have no gas, and I didn't want to be pushing my car. And so I had to pay that gas, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is this, right? And that is the reality. And thank God, to God be the glory, I can pay the money to get my gas, right? But every family cannot do that. It is challenging with, again, cuts in everywhere for our families to even have the bus to get on because the rides are not going the same ways. I was in the Miles area, and the buses have been cut, so they don't always, it can be an hour, 90 minutes for one bus to come to get them from A to B. That's challenging. We can't get, it's very challenging for our families to get around, and all of these things are linked to political implications as well. So I want us to really encourage folks to vote. I know we have an election in this state in November. Like, we have to be really vigilant about getting folks, and we have to do the thing where we take 5 folks with us to go vote and encourage people to do it, because this is very serious. And as we see, our lives are being truly impacted by everything happening at the federal level at this point.
And I just want to dovetail, because I do appreciate what you said, whether, especially for our young people, whether you're into politics or not, politics is into you. And whether you show up or not, decisions are being made about your lives every day. And that goes for everyone in the room, but especially to our young people, because the decisions that we make or fail to make are going to have the most lasting impacts on your lives than anyone. So the sooner you get involved, and I see one of my Youth Advisory Council folks here, and so I'm very grateful for that. And so I want to make sure that we have your attention. The fact that you're here and you're engaged is amazing. And I want you to be able to articulate to your peers the importance of your political and civic engagement. Because the thing about this is that Jazmin said, people don't try to take things away from you that don't have value. And the fact that they are working so hard to take away people's vote, and in this environment, I'm making it very plain, black political power right now is under attack. And as I sit here and see so many of our young black women at that table, not to exclude anyone else, it is very important that you recognize your political power is trying to be stolen from you, because they recognize how much progress we are able to make when we use it. So please don't dismiss or discount the power of your vote, because when it comes to power in this country, that is the one thing that levels the playing field. Whether you are black, white, rich, poor, Democrat, Republican, GED to PhD, everybody gets one vote. So make sure that you always use it in every single election, because these elections are not promised to us. They are not a guarantee, they are a gift. So make sure you take very good care of it.
Yes, yes, and yes. On the what's driving the high prices, I did just want to give you some data points, and I didn't want to rely on my memory to give you those, so I typed those out. But what's contributing? I think, Congresswoman, you nailed it. These wars are certainly contributing. Tariffs are contributing. Immigration restrictions are unnecessarily contributing. The inequities are contributing, and all of those are components and factors of inflation. If I'm talking to just the general audience here, younger and older, we have to know what the economic indicators are that ultimately are going to affect us. We have to know what the consumer price index is, and the PPI, the producer index. We have to know what these are, because those are the components of inflation, and each of the 3 components of inflation are all up. From March to April, they're all up. Year over year, they're up. So if someone's telling us that inflation's not real, I think inflation last month was 3.8%. The target's 2%, so it's almost twice as high as it should be. What does inflation mean? It means that the cost, essentially, of goods and services are outpacing your incomes. So if I were to distill this, and see now Congresswoman and Jazmin, you have me looking at the young folks over here. If I were to distill it, I would say a couple of things. One is, please beware of people who tell you it's not for you. I think it's too pervasive in our communities where just unilaterally I keep hearing college isn't for you. Says who? Right? There are a lot of folks who were around me in a dorm room and in classrooms, and some made it and some different, but everyone there had a chance to find out, right? When I asked the same question to some wealthy colleagues in a room, after they went on a diatribe of why college isn't for so many people, I asked them, how many of you have said that to your children? And not one hand was raised, right? And so I think we have to be careful of what we unintentionally perpetuate,
Yes.
but we also have to recognize which way the wind is blowing and which way the wind is going to blow. And knowing what those indicators are can help. I always say we can plan for just about anything. But in under-resourced communities, it's just that. The resources that will tell us in the next 12 to 18 months, A, B, and C is likely to occur by 80% likelihood or greater. Then you know, all right, let's tighten the belt. Let's put on suspenders. Let's reduce our spending. But if you don't have those resources in our communities, then we continue to do what we've been doing because it has been working well enough. And when we find out that the tide has changed, it's too late. So then what's kind of the undercurrent to that? There's a skills gap that is accelerating right now. It used to be a STEM conversation. It used to be a magnet conversation. Now it's an AI conversation. It's a robotics conversation. It's an automation conversation. And that needs to be at the center of all of our planning for our businesses, for our homes and how we operate. Because if we don't do those exercises now, we'll be so far behind that it'll certainly be impossible to catch up. The technology is moving fast. The laws that govern them are lagging. But you got to get in there and get to know it and know how to use it. If you don't, then you become the fear of it, which is replacement. But that's not necessarily the reality. You just want to put yourself in a position to be able to manage it. And so as we see AI rolling out, it's not the enemy. But if we let it run without the safeguards, without the proper governance, and without our participation, then we're subject to whatever happens after that. And that subjectivity, right, is not being able to purchase a home, not being able to send your kids to a quality school with a quality education. And so the through line is we have to get incomes up. We got to get incomes up. I was told when I was younger, and now 30 seconds. I was told when I was younger, you could learn and earn your way out of poverty. And then 5-6 years ago, the data came back and said, the needle doesn't really move, regardless of your education. You can be an African-American female with a master's degree and have the highest miscarriage rates in the country. So how are these things coexisting? And then we look at a country now, and I don't idolize any of these folks, but billionaires are making decisions for us. You can't tell me money doesn't matter. You can't tell me it doesn't matter. It doesn't buy everything. It won't make you happy, and it won't replace love. But without it, we're relying on someone else to advocate for us. And my experience has been, if we're not careful with whom we choose or select to advocate for us, we might find that when the rubber meets the road, when it gets tough, when it's no longer perfect, they're no longer advocating, but they don't send us an email, right? So these are kind of the social and the economic components to inflation and to the effects of inflation. And hopefully the latter portion of that was, how do we mitigate that? We can't rely on the benevolence of others. We can no longer rely on a government to take care of the least, even if that's a temporary scenario. I was told by a Russian friend that their children in Russia, the babies, they get chicken and vegetables and potatoes and rice at daycare that's paid for by the government. And we just had SNAP benefits cut. Right? So it's not a question of what we can do. It's whether we have a will to do it. And are we as citizens and people going to prioritize where and how we spend our time to change the condition, to force the change of that condition? That's the part that I think we need to sharpen our pencils on. But by you folks being here tonight tells me this, I'm preaching to the choir, right? So hopefully when I talk to you later and you talk to me later, you give me some nuggets that I can take back to another part of our community and help people feel empowered, because the power is always with the people.
Well, thank you all for your responses. And continuing on that economic indicator front, a recent report entitled "The Municipal Cost of Climate Change," written by Power Clean Future Ohio, Ohio Environmental Council, and the Cioto analysis, indicated that cities could face billions in additional costs tied to climate impacts over time. When you hear that, what stands out most to you and what concerns you most?
I was going to say, I just talked for a long time, so I was going to. So just a couple of thoughts on that. And I'll be quick here. The report suggests that municipalities are going to pay between $1.8 and $5.9 billion for climate change-related events. Municipalities are not getting the capital and funding that they have historically received, that they're entitled to, And so that puts a real squeeze in. It'll be treating algae blooms in waterways, storm water management, power grids, just giving a couple highlights from the report, and public health and safety. You know, the cost of cooling, the hotter it gets, the greater the pull on the grid and the more it costs to cool. France is going through that right now. But the impact, like, what do I think about when I hear that? I think lower income and moderate communities are going to be squeezed even more. Right? That's what that tells me. If there's not a tax base in a community that is valued the way other communities are valued, then they're going to always feel the pain first, longer, and at blunt force. It has the potential to pit communities against each other. This is the danger of scarcity. What people will do to survive, I can't point a finger at that until that's my reality. But when some communities are getting resources that are basic rights and resources, and another community can't feed their children, when parents are working 2 jobs and they can't cover the expenses, not egregious expenses, just the basics, it pits people against each other who should not be pitted against each other. And I guess from that perspective, the federal government needs to step in and redefine what infrastructure really is and the controls around infrastructure. I do want to, that pitting communities against each other, I want to come back to a comment that I made. I am an advocate for people of color. I'm an advocate for black people, for Latinos, but frankly, I'm an advocate for all people. And so I think in this panel, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, when we call out people of color or African Americans or Latinos, it's only because often it's a sub-bullet and a sub-point, and I know I just don't want it to be missed. But when we create solutions, those solutions are for everyone. If I only create solutions for one side of the street or for one group of people, then it's tough calling that a 360 community, and it pits people against each other. But whatever we put in motion, people who want to thrive in the United States should have the ability to thrive. And if we're getting in the way of that, we should get out of the way. But nobody on this panel is in the way. When we look at the administration that's in front of us now, there's a propensity to cause harm and hurt and pain. These are times when communities need to come together even more.
And if I might,
Please.
we have just a practical for the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, the recent hailstorm that just happened a month or so ago. That is one of the most financially expensive catastrophes that we've had as a community. That is exactly tied to the environment. And when we think about who's impacted by that, that's our lower income communities. I have a couple of friends, they're just in Cleveland Heights, and their cars just got completely destroyed. And thank God for insurance, but those things are gonna now rise for them and all the implications around that. And how do you really try to survive in a time where, again, the wages aren't where they need to be? You're trying to take care of yourself. Gas is so much, eggs are so much, and trying to provide for your family and really reconciling with the fact that we just had a disaster that really had an impact on people's lives. And so I think all of this is really important to really consider and to think about when we're talking about the statistics are incredible to know. Knowing how to read, evaluate, and understand those things are important. But then just as a lived experience, what is truly happening in the lives of people in our community that actually have a tremendous impact that may both negatively impact them and or who is benefiting from the thing, which I think is what you're saying, right? It's who's actually benefiting versus who is having a negative implication from everything that's happening around us.
Thank you very much. I want to shift over to public health, and going right back to you, Jazz, I would like to ask, black infant mortality rates exceed white infant rates by more than 3 times. Research links those outcomes directly to environmental conditions such as air quality, housing, heat exposure, and more. In your work, how much of what you're fighting is actually an environmental fight?
Thank you. And so, again, I'm actually very happy for this panel to see African Americans having this conversation, because I don't know that we always have the conversation about the environment. And so infant mortality is, again, one of those pervasive things that can be linked to so many factors in our community, but the environment is so important, which is why even for our building, we're doing a grant to get tree canopies as well. Again, just to be able to cool the area down, to provide some relief for people, because that heat exposure is critically important. It's not something that people even understand. Like, if you only have one way to get to the grocery store, and it's walking and or by getting on a bus, but you might have to walk 3 miles after that, that's all you can do, right? That is your way to get there. And so what we try to do is mitigate those expenses for our client, but also to educate people to think about the role that the environment plays in everything that we're experiencing, how pollution plays a role. I was I was at Midtown, and we're doing the Huff revitalization, and a young man, a little baby, 15, 16 years old, was talking about how important it is to pick up the trash. Just educating people about just the importance of, one, beautification, because I think that's the other thing that we're talking mental, but how important is it for you to see your community look good, the buildings around you look nice, to not have trash on the ground, to not have those things. All of that plays a role in what you experience. Like, I think about these things, and we have to give this to our clients and educate them about that as well, because infant mortality is so, again, I hate to keep using the same word, pervasive, right? It's just all of these things really play a role, and if we don't teach and educate people how to do better, and again, I didn't grow up in a home where we talked about politics. I didn't grow up in a home where I thought about this kind of stuff, but I am now at a place and space where I can think about these things, and it's my job and our education to help our community to understand when you're dealing with helplessness, hopelessness, we're trying to figure out how to deal with period poverty, just all of those kind of things. How can you, the stressors of life, and that's the social drivers of health that lead to poor birth outcomes, and you have all of those mitigating factors going in your mind. The environment may be the last thing that you're thinking about, but for those of us who can, we really have to make a concerted effort to make this a priority, because we are all living this planet, and this is all we got, and so we should protect it and take care of it for our babies, again, to come. I think, again, I'm thinking about the youth and the young people and how everything that we do makes a lasting impact on your lives. And as such, everything that you guys do will make a lasting impression on the next generation of people as well. And so it is really important for us to recognize these factors and to work with our different nonprofits that are trying to plant more trees, and to work with our Congresswoman, who really is trying her hardest. She has done so much. She has introduced so many pieces of legislation that really would, yes, clap for our girl. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to make a difference and impact on our entire region. And so again, that's why the voting becomes so important, and just having like-minded people, or at least having folks who understand the plight of the regular person. I am very blessed, again, to be able to get the gas in my car, but not everyone is. And this is really real here in Northeast Ohio as well, with our families, and actually the whole state of Ohio, where people are really suffering. And I think that the environment plays a tremendous role, from our rural to our urban areas, with folks suffering with these things.
Thank you very much. My next question is, data from SDG Cities Index shows Cleveland-Akron's area rated red, meaning they face major challenges on poverty, gender equality, and life on land. These patterns follow the lines of redlining and decades of disinvestment. How did we get here?
You just said it. Decades of disinvestment, but how does that happen? How are our cities the ones who suffer the most? And that goes back to the very fundamental thing that we're talking about, the people in power who are making the decisions for the lives that are being impacted by the redlining, by the communities that don't get the resources. It's the people that we elect, the people who have the decisions and control the political purse strings, if you will, to say who gets the resources, which communities will get the money. And so it's policy. And you can see a stark contrast, and I hate to keep, bringing up the difference, but we had an administration that passed the Inflation Reduction Act that prioritized environmental justice, that made sure that people were able to, underserved communities were going to have access to solar panels on their homes, which would reduce their energy costs, which could essentially make their lives more affordable. And we had another administration come in and just snatch that away. We had an administration who were investing in schools to make sure they too could run more efficiently. Now we have an administration that came in and just took that away. And so it matters who's in power, who's making the decisions, and what their priorities are, and holding them to account when they either do or don't fulfill the wishes of the people that elected them. So do not neglect your voice and your vote and your advocacy in this space, because you hold power to make a difference. So holding us accountable is part of the responsibility that you have, because voting is just one step. That's just the beginning, to be honest. That's just the start of the process. So what am I doing once I get into office? Well, I've introduced policies like the National Tree Canopy Act to try to make sure that we're getting more trees planted. I've introduced legislation to try to restore the $187 billion cut to SNAP program. So the people in office matter, and you have the ability to decide who they are.
I'd like to add to that exclamation point. The perspective also of once you've made a bit of the turn, right? Things are working out for you. You're doing well. That other side of the conversation, that is the opportunity side. And to your point, Congresswoman, what's our responsibility then? And it can't just be to hoard it all for ourselves, right? Like that's the other side of this conversation. In everything that you have heard today, there's opportunity. Are we leaning in hard enough and long enough to see it? Because whoever seizes it is going to be the one who's going to be early in the investment. They'll have some of the greatest impact. And if we're not looking for opportunities at every chance, then we're getting the leftovers of someone else's investment after they've exited. That's always more expensive. In economics, it's called a V factor, right? Like markets come down, and when they start to come back up, there's never anyone in the moment who says, today at 203 is the bottom of the market. It's actually a 3-month lag. I think it's 3-quarter lag before they even deem it a recession. And so, but the market has already begun to recover. And that V factor is that first section of it where if you have the capital or the cash to invest, you'll typically do pretty well, and you can typically exit without carrying the long-term risks of market fluctuations later. If we are not looking for opportunities when that squeeze comes that you heard about, inflation, and those other factors that the health determines, if we're not looking for those early opportunities, then we are beginning later with higher risk and a derivative of what someone else already extracted the value from and discarded. That has social effects, that has health effects, that has climate effects, it certainly has economic effects. But if we don't have these conversations, then we're waiting for somebody else to put a stamp on it and say, now it's time. But I think history has taught us, when folks say it's time after they've used it, it's no longer time for them. They've moved on to something else.
That's right.
And so it's likely past time.
That's right.
Thank you all for your responses. And I have one more question from you guys, because I want to continue this conversation, but I also want to hear from the people here, and I'm going to ask if our team from OEC, if you guys could help us by starting to collect some of the note cards and funneling them up here for the open dialogue portion. That would be really appreciated. Thank you so much. My final question for you guys as we prepare for these for the open dialogue. Cleveland neighborhoods have long carried disproportionate environmental and infrastructure burdens. How should we evaluate impact when considering future large-scale industrial or technology infrastructure projects like hyperscale data centers?
So again, shout out to my Youth Advisory Council who presented on this for their final presentation. I have a group of students, high school juniors and seniors, who learn all of the aspects of what it takes to govern, particularly in Congress. And so they do a presentation at the end of the year, and one of the groups presented on data centers. And the way they did their presentation was absolutely phenomenal. Even made it very easy to understand, digestible. I don't know where that presentation is, but we will make sure that everyone who is interested gets a copy of it, because it was great. But the long and short of it is that it comes down to two things for me. It comes down to energy, so your bills and the costs, and the water use, right? Those are the two main things. And so we have to make sure that these companies that are coming in are being held accountable, that they're not skating by, that they're paying their fair share when it comes to energy costs. I think that sometimes the juice may not be worth the squeeze as far as the presentation goes. So we have to make sure that we're holding them accountable. I think what the mayor and what Polincic did in the city council by rejecting the data center was the right thing to do, because we need to make sure, again, that these companies are not just getting away with polluting our environment and overusing our resources, and making sure that they are paying their fair share of the energy costs. And if we can get on that, if we can get some agreement on that, then we can certainly have future conversations. But that is the starting point. That is the baseline as far as I'm concerned. So thank you.
And I
Thank
think
you.
we maybe have not necessarily said the word racism today, but I think it's, again, very important. I think Michael hinted on this, and you have also, Congresswoman. Where are things going? Like, what communities are they being established in? Who is going to be impacted by them? All of those things, to me, matter. Would you want this in your community? And if you wouldn't want this in your community, why would you want it in mine? And I think that those are things that we have to really think about when we look at these kind of things. And I won't say more than you so that we can get to questions, but again, like, these are the critical questions that we have to ask, that we have to be willing to lean on. And that's why I'm so grateful for the individuals who do go to city council on Mondays and, you know, give public comment and say, we don't want this in our community. We are not going to stand for this. And in our last election here, we had some people that didn't win their seats because people really said, I am not standing for X, Y, and Z. And they said, I'm running against you because you're supporting this, and I don't like it, and they won. And so I do think that our voices have power. I think it's saying something to our legislators that know, hey, we are not going to stand for the status quo anymore. We don't have to. And we can fight back, and we can run for office, and we can do these things as well and have an impact.
The United States has more data centers than any other country. We have between 5,000 and 5,400 data centers in the United States. The second closest country is the UK, and they have about 500. So it begins to beg the question, why do we need all of these data centers all of a sudden, right? Yeah. Data centers have a short, useful life. It's about 15 to 20 years. It's not long for massive investment, extraction of tax breaks, but it also takes thousands of generators with diesel fuel to run these things. And then they can consume up to 5 million gallons of water a day. A day. So after 15, 20 years, let's give it 25. With that much diesel running, what good is that land after they're done and they've extracted, remember the V factor? They've extracted their investment, and the leftovers are now for you. Are you supposed to build your home there? Your children to play on the playground there? Interesting thing about environmental contamination in the ground is it doesn't stay in one place. It runs off, right? And you don't know until decades later the impact that it has, right? So I don't think we know enough about data centers to make that kind of investment. I don't know that it's the data center that's the issue. It's typically the how. So, you know, the cost of cooling and all of this water, there are ways to get around that. There are ways to recycle water. There are ways to cool it, you know, but those who are benefiting from it are not looking downstream to cut profits so that you can be healthy. And when that happens, you need to be the first to recognize it. Your elected officials are already raising their hands, as you mentioned. But buyer beware. And as we mentioned earlier, the laws are lagging. And there's some question, what do we need that much data for? There's some thoughts. Cameras, yeah. This has been one of them. To be able to listen in, because a lot of the cameras that are currently deployed don't have sound attached. That requires a lot of data. But do you want to spend money on that and not babies? That and not mothers? Right? That and not people who are working hard and still can't pay exorbitant rents and mortgages? I don't think that's what we are electing to do. But it's being rammed down the United States citizens' throats to just accept it because billionaires are putting it in motion. So I'll close that with, it's an expensive proposition to put data centers in communities where we once put landfills, to wait and see what happens on the backs of each of you in this room. I'm not anti-data center yet, I'm getting close. But I'm certainly not for this many unknowns for people to absorb in their bodies and for their children and their own well-being to have the adverse potential effects.
And another statistic, I think one data center is said it could power 100,000 homes. So that is an exorbitant amount of energy that they're utilizing. And again,
right.
On the backs of who?
That's right.
And for what?
North Carolina is looking at $2 billion in rebates to construction costs that won't come back to them for data centers. And so if municipalities are already feeling the squeeze and the pressure, then data centers are going to extract the rest of it. I think there's just a lot more work to do, and so be loud. Even if being loud just says, we don't know enough. You don't have to be the expert on it. I don't know enough to subject my family to this. And if we're really good at this, folks, it doesn't have to just be my family, right? To see ourselves in each other. To say, my neighbor deserves better than this. The people in that neighborhood, even though it's not my neighborhood, they deserve better than this. That's when we really get good at all this stuff.
Thank you guys very much for your responses. Our first question from the audience, Lake Erie is our economic/environmental asset. What are your thoughts on current approach to stormwater control and water quality in this region?
I think our county executive is doing a great job at the Freshwater Institute. I think one of the things that we are having more dialogue about, and we've got some experts down here, the Hood sisters down there. We've got a lot more awareness on how water runs. And we had the benefit of taking our interns last summer to experience that with these two sisters, to understand how glacial water runs through oceans and rivers and tributaries and lands just north of us at the Lake Erie Islands that most of the kids didn't know were there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for not only how we treat water, but how we experience it, for our kids to be able to play in it. At a time to reflect when it used to be illegal for people who look like me just to be in public water. Now that we have access, how are we gonna roll it out to our kids? My godmother's grandbaby is doing swimming lessons. I'm so glad, because so many of our babies drown, right?
Yeah.
Water is an asset, but if you're not introduced to it in a calm way, then it creates fear. We have 20% of the world's fresh water, I believe, in our backyard here. And hopefully the downtown revitalization will give us more access to it. But we've got kayaking now downtown. The crew environment is really picking up. Let's not sleep on it. And with a nod to our young people, know that it's for you too. So find your way there to one of the richest resources that the globe has. It's right in your backyard and you've got access to it.
I'm proud to say
Thank you.
we've been delivering resources to the tunes of millions of dollars into the county, part of that in for the Freshwater Institute, but also to build connectivity along the shoreline so that people can enjoy it who historically have not been able to access the shore. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you guys very much. The next question we have, and I'm going to combine two questions from people here, is how do you define environmental justice, and what are some future plans and projects to help with environmental justice?
Environmental justice is everybody's equal access to environmental protection, period. I think that's the technical definition. Everybody has the right to have equal protection of their environmental rights.
And for me personally, that means clean water, clean air, safe spaces to live, work, and play. That is environmental justice to me. And so when it gets to policy-making decisions, that is fundamentally what I am looking at. How are these policies going to improve the quality of life for the constituents who sent me to Washington to fight for them? And so that means bringing back investments again to keep our water clean, to remove lead from homes. So we have lead remediation programs. That means removing lead pipes from our city so that we have clean drinking water. So those are the things that I am doing, that I am fighting for, fighting to bring back resources. And that, again, we had alignment from the Biden-Harris administration who believed in those things and making those investments so that we can have true environmental justice regardless of your zip code, regardless of the city in which you live in. So that's what it means personally to me.
Thank you very much. Next question we have is, trying to read this. We'll come back to this one. And how about this? Given the challenges we're facing, what are some actionable things we can actually do for the environment? Give me some hope and pathways forward.
So, I mean, number one, you showing up here is a first start and a great start. I think getting more information, getting better informed on the policy decisions that are happening before you, the people who are actually doing the work. I think something more tangible, if you have opportunities for to participate in tree planting events, those things, they may seem small, but they are so impactful and can really change the landscape, literally and figuratively, of someone's life and future. Those are some of the simple things that you can do. And then just empowering and informing other people about how environmental justice is beneficial, how important it is to our future. Jazmin said it. The Earth is only one. This is the only planet that we have. This is the one that we have to take care of. Mother Earth is the only place where we are able to live right now. And so how we beautify, how we care for it, how we prepare it for the future is incumbent upon us. And we shouldn't just look at it as an immediate thing, but also how we can protect this planet for the future. So being here, though, is a great start, and then taking any information that you have. Hopefully we've left you with some nuggets that you can apply that'll give you some hope. But the future is not dark and grim and bleak. It is what you make it. We can envision a better and brighter future, and we have the ability to do that, y'all. I don't want you to think just because of one person that is in power that is trying to claw back all the progress that we made, that it is not able to recur, because we have the capacity and the ability to do that again. We've been in far worse predicaments, but we have so many resources available at our disposal right now that we did not have in the past. The power of social media is a tool to help spread positive information too. So we can use that as well. Take something that you have that struck a chord with you today and share that so that we can continue to move forward, because progress is not permanent. We have to fight for it, but I have to see you fighting for it. You have to fight for it, and it can't just rely on Michael, Brian, Jazmin, and I to do it. We need everybody in on this effort to protect our environment and to bring it to justice.
Yeah, I echo that wholeheartedly. And again, talking to folks about picking up the trash, just the little things that truly and honestly make a difference in our communities. Educating folks about what you've heard today, going back and taking it back to your people, and everything that the Congresswoman said, and I'm sure Michael's going to bring it home as well, but these are things that really can make a difference. And it is not all doom and gloom. We are working hard. People are working hard. I think people recognize the importance of taking care of this planet of ours, and we want to ensure they're able to be here and be sustained. And again, I just think it cannot be underscored how important using our voices are in the political sphere is.
I would add to that, be curious. and recognize that kind of what happens domestically in the United States is not unilaterally the best way to do things or the most innovative product. And so be curious across borders, be curious across countries. We just returned from Belgium, and a great example of the vote matters. So they were showing us how they have rainwater that's captured below ground for each home in large canisters. And that water gets filtered, and that's the water they use to wash their clothes and to water the lawn. And if that runs out, then the public water kicks in, immediately lowering costs. But it wasn't an opt-in, it was a requirement, it was codified. Here, folks would scream bloody murder about freedom, right? Like freedom to be, I won't finish that sentence. And so be curious and with the humility that enters the room that says someone might be doing this better and maybe has been at this longer.
That's right.
And let's start from there. China's got some amazing innovations. In some rooms, China's a bad word. But I chuckle sometimes because if you go back to the 40s and 50s, yellow was a bad word. They called you yellow. It's a color. China does some bad things, but technology on this particular topic, they're leading the pack. Let's not be so unintentionally arrogant to miss an opportunity to start further around the bases and then bring those technologies back to the communities that we know and we love.
Thank you. This is the last question that we have, folks. Given the lack of regulation and safeguards around AI proliferation and data centers, how do we protect against environmental and economic consequences? And how do we prepare for AI?
Okay, well, sorry, because I think you have greater expertise. But one of the things, I do want to dovetail into your last comment around the Chinese Communist Party. And it's not necessarily China. I do want to make the distinction because it's the Chinese Communist Party that actually does a lot of the bad things that are happening in the country. I serve on a committee called the Global Competition with the Chinese Communist Party. And so we do see a lot of exploitation of the things that they do, but we also, to your point, they have a lot of innovation. As it relates to regulating data centers, I think that what's been happening with the federal government, and not just in AI, but a lot of things, is we get paralysis analysis. We don't have a lot of people in Congress right now that have the expertise in our artificial intelligence, and so we get stuck in trying to make sure that we don't have legislation that ends up with unintended consequences that causes more harm than good. And so there has been a lot of hesitation to move forward in full transparency. And so I encourage people that sometimes the best ideas don't always come from us, they come to us. And so that's why people like experts like Michael Jean, I lean on him to be able to help me shape policy, to be able to introduce to my colleagues so that we can get some guardrails in place. But the other thing I would encourage folks to do that you said so perfectly is that we cannot be in a place of fear as it relates to artificial intelligence and all that it has to offer. It is a tool, and we don't want to get left behind because we're so fearful of it or so afraid. Now, I've introduced legislation around making sure that when there have been election pieces that are generated by AI, that it should be flagged. There should be some type of labeling on it so that people know, because right now it's becoming much more affordable, much more accessible, far more people are able to do it and use it, that being able to distinguish reality from artificial intelligence, especially on social media, is going to become increasingly more difficult. And so those are things that are simple enough to process that I would like to be able to get across the finish line in the House of Representatives, so you can have your friends in other states call and say, hey, get on Shontel's artificial intelligence bill, so that we can have some way to at least determine what's happening in our election space. But don't be fearful of it, because I would equate it to something, perhaps we say electricity. We equate it to electricity. Like, you know, it is here to stay. It is not going anywhere. So we should become more familiar with it so that when the times come, we aren't too far behind. We aren't left behind.
I agree with absolutely everything the Congresswoman just said. Just quickly, by raise of hand, who has used ChatGPT? Strong. All right. Who's used generative AI? Still strong. Generative AI. Who's using AI agents? Yeah, see, right? There's a lag. Thank you. This AI is a series of building blocks. And so I'm so glad to see so many hands raised for ChatGPT, because you can't really use the generative AI the way you need to if you don't do the reps for or take the steps on the building blocks for ChatGPT. These AI agents are pretty impressive, what they can create and do and monitor. But we have to stay at the pace of the technology and stay ahead of the pace of the technology, because if that's where the risk is. The risk is allowing it to outrun us, but we still program it. It still does what we tell it to do, and sometimes poorly. So I want you to stay in front of the tech. Sure, it's going to replace some jobs, but some horses and carriages are no longer driving us around, right? There's always something on the other side of the innovation and the opportunity of the thing. And I encourage each of us, to your point, Congresswoman, regardless of what's happening at a federal level, I encourage us to continue to look around the corners and be curious. I encourage us, when we look around the corners, to look around the corners not alone, but with others. And I encourage us to not be preoccupied with a thirst for sameness. It's the fracturing of our communities that is making it less of an impact to react and respond and become proactive on some of the things that we're seeing coming down at the federal level. But the moment we allow that silliness to be set aside and we depoliticize environment and climate that we all share globally, now we're talking a humanity conversation. Now it's a progressive conversation. But until then, we're stepping over each other for crumbs after that first part of the V factor has already been ascertained and extracted by someone else. We're fighting over the crumbs where all the risk is. I think you deserve better. I think your children deserve better. But until we come together and agree on that, until we're okay leaving home with someone who doesn't look like us living next door, until we're honest in having the conversations about race, I'm proud of the race conversations. No one has to apologize to me for my ethnicity. But if we're stuck, if we're uncomfortable having that dialogue, if we're whispering, but she's white or he's black, we are so early in the fundamental conversation that we're not even at the environment. We're not even at the place where we can do what's remarkable. And those remarkable things, I think, are what are required now when laws are being applied to at will and not legally. You could argue we're at a Dred Scott kind of a Supreme Court, but that was 128 years ago. And so I guess for me, the moral of the story is, as the Congresswoman said, we've been through worse, but each time we came through it, we did it together. And we can't forget that this time, because that's not just a domestic conversation. That togetherness is going to be necessary for us to manage and lead whatever AI is going to become. But who programs it? And when they do, will they see you in the programming and the outputs? We got to be close enough. And just coming back to what the Congresswoman said, our congressional leaders are there to represent us, our interests. That means they want to hear from you. Where you have expertise, share it. Because where you're not, someone else is. And they may not be representing your interests in a way that you would represent the interests of your family.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to give a round of applause to our panelists here. Thank you guys so much for being here. I want to echo what's been said already. This is a conversation that is needed. Intersectionality is at the heart of environmental justice, and I'm glad to bring several different perspectives to the table to have this much needed conversation. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you all for participating as well. And with that said, that concludes our panel discussion, but I hope you guys will stay. I hope you guys will have food. I hope that you guys will check out our policy platforms from the Cleveland Environmental Advocacy Coalition, the table with the Cleveland Parks and Green Space Coalition, and with the City of Cleveland and Department of Sustainability in the back of our friends over there. So please stay, network, and thank you all again for being here. Bye, guys.